Okay, guys, today we have on Brandon Black, known on Twitter as ReardenCode. He's one of my longtime internet friends, and I've been wanting to have him on. And now we have a subject, hopefully, that will be invigorating. It's top of mind. And Rearden is pretty spicy. And so, I think this will be a fun conversation. We're going to talk about quantum today. Rearden, give us a bit of background, and then also in doing so, give us a bit of background as to how you have been one of at the forefront of this quantum discussion, at least on my timeline.
Yeah, sure. So background on me, I've been kind of in computer security for 15, close to 20 years now. Worked in Amazon payments and a bank security company before getting into Bitcoin coding. So kind of thinking about security has been my bread and butter for a very long time. So that's the important background for this discussion, I think. And then in terms of quantum, I don't know how I got into the middle of it. I'm a default skeptic. Whenever there's excitement about something, I come at it skeptically. And so just to give that, full disclosure, I do default to skepticism. And so when I started reading some of the newer quantum discussions in the last maybe year or so, there's been more noise about it. I really wanted to dig deeper. I wanted to make sure, I tried to check my own biases. And so that's actually how this happened, is that I went to check my own biases, and the deeper I dug into it, the more skeptical I became. So then I was like, well, if my default skepticism is only getting reinforced as I dig deeper, I'm going to start talking about it. And because at that point, I'd also learned a lot about it. So I learned about, what they're doing and how they're trying to deal with the quantum challenges and everything. And nothing that I read relieved any of my skepticism. It all made me more skeptical. So that's how I got here.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and that's basically what I've kind of inferred from the timeline. I've always, you host occasionally these spaces on Twitter, by the way. This is a shout out. You guys should listen to these, where you guys talk about Bitcoin development. Shinobi's on there. Some of the, guys building on Bitcoin are in there. So my point is that I've respected you as somebody who's generally aware of what's going on, and also you're fairly technical. I think that's something that I would also want to make sure people have some context here. I'm not bringing on some random guy who just dug into it. You've been, technical and in Bitcoin for quite some time. Okay. So when you started digging into quantum, what was your, you said a year ago, this is really kind of festered in the past, I don't know, a couple of weeks. We'll get into that. But a year ago, what was the initial, okay, I want to look into this because of, the discussion, and what were sort of your initial takeaways?
Yeah. So I think I'm trying to remember the timeline, but I know, I kind of got pulled into it partially because people I respect started looking closer into it. Hunter Beast is an internet friend.
Yep.
And so when he started pushing to do more work on BIP360 or other quantum resistance in Bitcoin, that catches my attention. Anytime someone wants to change Bitcoin, it's an important thing. And frankly, I want to change Bitcoin. So in another sense, that's another reason I got into the quantum. I was like, maybe this is a good reason to make upgrades to Bitcoin. So that's what kind of brought me into here. And so some of my early thoughts were basically, one, in reviewing the early work that Hunter Beast and others were doing on quantum resistance, I found myself really skeptical of the quantum resistant signature algorithms as appropriate for Bitcoin. There are some algorithms out there, quantum resistant, that as far as I can tell, are cryptographically sound. There's some noise on the timeline right now of people saying, if we push risky crypto into Bitcoin, it could break it. I think a carefully chosen algorithm does exist that would be secure. So I just want to be clear. I don't think it's all bad crypto, but they don't seem appropriate for Bitcoin because they're large. And we know, Bitcoin, everyone teases Bitcoin for being 7 transactions per second. It's not going to be Visa, right? And if we were to add one of the current quantum resistant algorithms, I think the best out there is almost an order of magnitude larger than elliptic curve signatures and keys. So we'd be dealing with then less than 1 transaction per second if we adopted one of those post-crypto algorithms. So while I wanted to change Bitcoin, I then had that, we're not ready for this yet reaction. Okay, well, if the post-quantum cryptography isn't ready yet, look, if that was ready, I'd be like, yeah, you know what? Let's just do it. Let's add it to Bitcoin. Let's make Bitcoin secure against this potential attack. There's no problem here. Okay, so it's not ready. Is this really a risk? Are we in trouble? Do we have to figure this out? Or can we take our time? Is really the question that then came to mind. So I started looking deeper into the claims of the quantum researchers. And what do they base their timelines on? Why is Hunter Beast and others feeling like this is a soon problem as opposed to a later problem?
Right.
And that's where I got really, really skeptical, because the example, I mentioned it on my timeline not too long ago, someone started claiming this thing, Nevin's law, right? They're saying, okay, Moore's law was for classical computers and Nevin's law is for quantum computers. And Nevin's law basically says that on some 1 or 2 year time range, we'll be doubling the number of logical qubits in our quantum circuits. And because quantum calculations can represent an exponential state within their calculation, and this is the fundamental promise of quantum is in here, right? That classical computers, every additional bit you can process is linear in how much more stuff you can actually represent. But because the quantum superposition, where each bit represents both states of that potential bit, additional bits represent exponentially more total state space, right? Because if you have 2 to the 2 is 4, 2 to the 3 is 8. That's how quantum bits represent stuff, is they represent all 8 of those states. So Nevin's law says that we're going to get double exponential processing power increases. And I mean, when you hear the word double exponential increase in something, you've got to be a little skeptical. So that was like one of the things that got me further down my skepticism. So then I'm like, okay, well, how fast are quantum bits scaling? And then it gets really confusing. So in the last year, we've had a bunch of different announcements. Oh, this chip has these many qubits, and that one has those many qubits, and all these announcements, right? And so the Nevin's law depends on how many logical qubits are in a chip.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, but before we go on, like maybe for 30 seconds, and I'm not trying to dumb this down to a level where nobody would find it interesting, but explain what again, just take as short a bit of time as you want. What is a quantum computer doing, and what is its 3-sentence risk to Bitcoin, if you will? Potential risk.
Sure.
Potential risk.
Great sidetrack. So the thing that a quantum computer can do, and I would say the theory here is sound, as far as I can tell. If we understand quantum mechanics correctly, which is a little bit of an if, but I think it might be true, then what the quantum computer can do is you can load it with some state about the world and kind of construct the quantum computer as a circuit that represents something about the real world. And once you've loaded that in, it can represent all the possible final states in its superposition of qubits. And so instead of, again, with a classical computer, the computer is always calculating one specific state of the potential of the algorithm you're working on. With a quantum computer, if you've designed the computer and the circuit within it correctly, it represents all possible outcomes of that calculation. And then you give it an input for that, and it resolves to the correct output for that input. And so that's kind of the trick or the benefit of the quantum computer, is that instead of having to, let's say, iteratively calculate each possible outcome, when you load it up and then kind of trigger it or prime it, let's say, with the state of your system, like I've got this public key, let me apply it to the circuit that calculates the private key to public key conversion, then it'll resolve to the correct private key. And it's a little more complicated than that. In Shor's algorithm, you technically can't do this directly. It uses a technique called period finding. But the general summary is still that you represent the way in which keys in Bitcoin or other elliptic curve systems rotate around the... Oh, man. Okay, got to explain more here. Let's take one step back.
Okay, you go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to get into the elliptic curve just a little bit here.
Yeah, perfect.
The key thing that makes elliptic curve cryptography difficult for classical computers is the fact that it's a discrete elliptic curve. It's not on all real numbers from 0 to infinity. There's a boundary, and the boundary is some specific number, which is called the... what's it called? Anyway, whatever. There's a prime number size of numbers within which the elliptic curve is calculated. So it rotates around as you add within the elliptic curve field. You're moduloing, going back down. So you're not just continually going up through the elliptic curve. You're rotating around a modulo, and so that is what then lets the quantum computer solve it as well. In theory, is that the quantum computer can figure out the periodic nature of that elliptic curve. And that lets you go backwards, in theory, again, to a private key. Normally, public key to private key is unreversible because a classical computer cannot figure out the period with which you move around the elliptic curve. So as you go through it, there's this impossibility of how do I go back to the previous step because I don't know the period. The quantum computer can do period finding using Shor's algorithm to go backwards in that step of stepping around the elliptic curve on this modulo process.
Got it.
So that's the danger to Bitcoin, is that if the quantum computer can do this for large enough input sizes, 256 bits, then it can go from a public key to a secret key, which obviously then unsecures all of our Bitcoin. Well, some details to be worked out there, but that's the danger, is that people could go take your public key that you publish because it's public and find your Bitcoin. This is a danger for all other cryptos that are not specifically quantum resistant. Ethereum also uses elliptic curve discrete or digital signature algorithm. So we're all in the boat together, essentially.
Okay. And maybe you can relay this again back just for a little bit of context. And like you were talking about classical computers. One of something I've been seeing I've been trying to follow this to the extent that I can on the timeline. I've been reading a lot of what you've said. And you mentioned you personally maybe even had more concerns that a classical computer would be able to decrypt keys before a quantum computer. Is that correct? Or is it just like, go ahead. But yeah, maybe you can relate that also to, like, again, differentiating like this, the quantum side versus the classical side. Why you're saying like, look, like I think currently it's probably more of a risk that we just get, extremely powerful classical computers versus even this like quantum idea. Yeah.
So the idea there would be, I mentioned there's this period finding thing you can do using Shor's algorithm. And we've seen in other crypto systems over the years, examples that come to mind are, when I was a young man and learning computers and stuff, we used 1024-bit RSA keys.
Yeah.
And algorithms for factoring prime numbers improved to the point that, factoring coprimes, improved to the point that RSA 1024-bit was no longer considered secure. And so we went to 2048-bit, and that's remained kind of probably fine, but most people now recommend using 4096-bit RSA keys. So we've seen this process of both the computing power increasing and the algorithms improving in classical computing to weaken otherwise secure crypto systems. And this also happened in the AES world. AES uses this, there's a generator function that changes the key material you're encrypting with for each block of data you're encrypting. And people have started to use algorithms to kind of start to work that backwards. So if you can get even a small portion of the message, you can then find a few bits of the key potentially and start to reverse that key rotation function of the AES. So there's techniques that people do in the classical algorithmic work that reduce the difficulty of breaking these crypto systems. And if both computing power increases fast enough and those algorithms improve fast enough, you end up eventually with breaking the crypto. In this case, breaking the public to private mapping for the keys. And so what would that look like for elliptic curve? Well, we would see someone in the classical world figuring out a way to transform the problem from this essentially impossible guessing game, trying to guess where backwards you would go on the curve, to some other structure of the problem that is maybe similar to what the quantum computer would do, a problem we know how to solve. So can you convert it to factoring primes that we're getting better at already? And can you then apply some techniques to simplify that factorization in one way or another? Can you use things you know about the structure of the curve itself in order to make the calculation less difficult? And over time, these advances, they've been happening in fighting crypto forever. That's why we upgrade crypto systems. That's why we don't use SHA-1 in the internet anymore, right? So that's the kind of thing I'd be talking about, is just the gradual slog through improving the algorithms and growing the compute power.
Got it. Okay, so I'm sure I'm going to come back to more technical questions that, hopefully you can elucidate. But let's just now kind of zoom out for a second and talk about current context. Where do you find yourself, if you had to like self-identify on the spectrum of, on one side,
well, I'm on the spectrum.
Okay, nice. So that's the quantum spectrum. Okay, so on one side of the spectrum, you have it's all a complete scam. charade. This is all, like basically hype and mania, and nobody knows what they're talking about. That's one side. And then on the far right, you have this is coming in 5 years. So I know you fall closer to the left side, but like, where do you from what I've, gleaned thus far, where do you where would you put yourself? And then maybe, yeah, like give us a little bit more, just, general ideas of like, okay, I think this is possible or it's not possible. I think you've said yourself, like you're skeptical it's even possible. So I'll let you go, but you get the general idea.
Totally. So I find myself in a superposition of two states on that, where on the one hand, I can say with extremely high confidence, I've looked at a lot of the work going on in quantum, and near certainty, we will not see a quantum break of elliptic curves or similar crypto systems in the next decade. So that's like near certain. So that's one part of me is this. I've thoroughly researched. There's just not a way that happens.
Good. I like those strong claims. Like those are good, sound bites. Like people actually make like bold claims like this, not like some nebulous stuff. But so anyways, go on.
Yeah. And then my emotional, I've talked to these people, I've asked them hard questions, and the answers I've gotten have been deeply unsatisfying. That part of me wants to say it's an absolute scam. So emotionally, all the way to the left, it's just a scam. But the logical, I've done research, I've thought about it, I've kind of read the papers. That's just, I'm certain it's not the next decade.
Okay, so I love this. And I'm also glad I brought you on. And maybe I'll get somebody who's more on the press. I'll bring Hunter Beast on, because this is somebody who's working on, like BIP 360. And yeah, we can talk also about that in a bit. But so where is this disconnect? Like right now, for example, as you know, I've seen you guys back and forth a million times now. Nick Carter is writing this kind of series of posts on quantum, and there's like zero from my perspective, there's almost no overlap. At least when I see you talking about this, it's like there's no coming to an agreement. Like, and it almost appears as though you don't even agree to disagree, right? It's like, no, you're wrong. And he's like, no, you're wrong. And there's not much of like, there doesn't seem to be much common ground. So let me ask you, I'm not asking you necessarily to steel man, but why is there such a divide? Like, why are there people like you who, I think you're very smart. I don't know enough about quantum computing to know if you're an expert on quantum computing, but I think you're technically smart. So, but exactly. So like, I don't even know who the experts to listen to are, but like, why is there this massive divide? Like, I see you making rational points, and then I see what I think are rational points from Nick. But, to be quite honest, I can read this stuff and be like, you guys could be speaking it. You guys could be both completely bullshitting. And I'd be like, yeah, that sounds good. I like, both you guys are right. Spot on. You know what I mean? So why is there this massive sort of like, obvious like divide here?
A big part of why we see the divide is, actually, I think there's a few points here. One is the quantum computing companies and researchers are able to put forward this pretty compelling set of evidence of, look, we've solved this problem. We can put these many physical qubits on a device. And we've seen progress, pretty decent progress in increasing the number of physical qubits on a device. We've seen pretty decent progress in reducing the error frequency within physical qubits. And so they can show, here, look at all this progress that we're making in these two domains. More physical qubits, fewer errors. And so that's where I think the excitement comes from, that people in the investing world and within the quantum field, they're like, look at all this progress we're making on these things. So that contributes to a divide, whereas from the outside, since I'm not a quantum researcher, I'm not a quantum expert, I'm just someone who thinks about things, right? That's really the best way to look at it. I'm someone who is very competent at reading research, and I do this like in my own life for like medical research. Like I go to the source papers for everything that I care about. So I just have a competence in reading research. So from my side, I look and I say, okay, how would I know if this was a problem? And the way that I would know that we have a potential quantum break coming is that I would see evidence of practical scaling against real world problems. And so I would say, okay, the last number that someone attempted to and published findings on factoring in the quantum computing world was 15, I believe. It might have been 21. I get confused about that sometimes. But the point is, it's a number that my 6-year-old can literally factor. I double checked. I asked him. And no one's done a bigger number.
Right. Yeah.
So if I don't, you're scaling this and that, but does that matter to the real world where we're going to eventually break a crypto system? And the only way that I, again, is not someone working in the quantum field could see, yes, this is going to be a problem, is if it factors a bigger number, if it does something harder than what it has already done. And so that's where the break comes, is that difference between, okay, we're improving these things, but do those things map to the real world? They don't seem to.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to interject quickly again now, back to your technical question. And I was trying to understand this beforehand. So when you talk about this idea of logical qubits, my understanding is that you can make all these qubits, but a lot of them are really screwy, right? They like mess up all the time. And so really you need like errors to be extremely, extremely low for this to be viable. And so that's one, I think. So can you kind of explain this idea of error correction, like how in order for these things to be viable for anything, the error rate needs to be, like orders of magnitude lower than it is now, or maybe, just a large decrease from where it is now?
Yeah. So the same way we talked earlier about how quantum computers can do exponentially more state mapping per qubit you add because of that property of being in two states at once, the same property means that errors have a similar exponential scaling, where if you have one qubit, you have some error rate, but if you had a second qubit, now you have that error rate exponentially increased. And so each qubit you add, whatever error rate you started with, the total error rate grows exponentially as the state space grows.
Got it.
So in order for a quantum computer to do its, I'll call it magic for the moment, but to do the computation, it has to have an error rate that's low enough that as we've added enough qubits, and to break elliptic curve, common 256-bit elliptic curves, you need somewhere around, I think it's 2,300, so between 2,000 and 3,000 logical qubits that are stable enough that you can get to that many qubits and still have something that's distinguishable from noise. So there's thinking kind of the way the math works here, they think you need to have something like 99.999% correct, so a 0.0001% error rate on each logical qubit for you to get to those 2,000-ish qubits and get an answer out at the end that is not just noise.
Okay.
So that's what we're talking about here, is that the errors scale exponentially with the state. So the benefit of quantum is also its kind of Achilles heel there.
Yeah. Okay. So then go back to this, like the number that a quantum computer is factored. One of the other arguments that I see from you and others on your side, it's kind of like a running joke. I think Casey Rodermore has this meme of like the goose like saying factor 21, like the goose honking at somebody. So one of the other sort of things people bring up is that like when people are showing a lot of the new research, like the breakthroughs, right? A lot of times when people are reading the research, like you gave, like I'm saying this in a really reductive way, but like you gave the computer the answer already. And so explain that to me, like what is that common trope, which is like actually you already told it the answer, so like that doesn't really count. And it seems like this comes up a lot, so I'm not like pulling something out of nowhere.
Yeah, I've been actually reading about that this morning because Bob McElrath and the quantum researcher are going back and forth this morning about it. And that does vary a lot between the different claims you see from the quantum folks. But in general, because the quantum field is I think they know they're struggling to map from their improvements in the various domains I mentioned to real world results. They're trying to find ways to get that mapping to happen. And so what they've kind of started moving towards now is that you try to take as much of the problem you want to solve and move it into the classical domain, do a bunch of pre-processing on the data that you want to solve for to make it simpler in the quantum side. So like how can we do as much work on, like, let's say GPUs before we give it to the quantum computer so that the quantum circuit itself is as small as possible? Because as we talked about, the quantum error rate scales exponentially with the number of qubits. We want to have that circuit be as small as possible. They're like, oh, we can pre-process this much, and then we can actually post-process that much. So now the quantum circuit is just this small piece in the middle that does the key thing we need from the quantum circuit, which is kind of reduce this exponentially sized problem space down to something the quantum circuit can solve in hopefully linear number of qubits, which it could be that's the theory. And so that's what we're talking about, is are they cheating essentially in how much pre-processing they do? And so Bob and this other guy this morning are going back and forth with when the quantum computer, they made the claim and published a paper that it factored, that it reversed the elliptic curve discrete log problem for a 6-bit elliptic curve. So that was the claim that was published. And Bob is claiming that they basically pre-processed the difficult step, and they didn't, and his claim is basically that they accidentally pre-processed the difficult step and then gave the quantum computer the easy step. They didn't realize that the way they had done their pre-processing isn't possible for a larger curve. It was possible because on a 6-bit curve, the classical computer or my 6-year-old can just do the math and pre-process, or actually could solve the whole thing. And so it's easy on a 6-bit curve to accidentally do the hard part in the classical circuit and then just give the easy part to the quantum circuit. Oh, look, it worked. So that's basically where we're at here is, did the quantum computer do the difficult part for real, or did the classical pre-processing do the hard part for it?
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to go back to something you said earlier about this, I think it was referred to as double exponential scaling, and you kind of laughed this off. And I think there is a tendency, right? Like I see this a lot in crypto, like outside of Bitcoin, which is like most people don't understand exponentials, right? Or like exponential growth, right? And so so at times it seems like a little bit belittling, right? And I think this is probably where you fall. And it's like, hey guys, like, it's not that I don't understand exponential growth. It's that like what you are showing me is not evidence of exponential growth. I'm just laughing because this is a frequent, and people love to cite Moore's law, or people love to cite, right before the Wright brothers took off, people said they would never fly. And it's like, okay, yeah. So one person who is, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, but is thought of as somewhat of an expert or a, thought leader is Scott Aronson. And he was, I think, the one who was talking about this idea of double exponential or whatever it was he was talking about. Is there anything that in your mind would make you think, oh, like maybe we are seeing exponential progress? Maybe this is different. And that's the main point I'm making. This time is different, right? This transcends any understanding of, Moore's law or, Metcalfe's law, scaling networks, like these kind of understood ideas we have. Is there anything that would change your mind on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I made that post specifically in a conversation with Nick this week. Yes, yeah. I am on the lookout. I am reading quantum papers when they come out, looking out for a demonstrable cycle where a quantum technology for qubits has been developed, have been manufactured at one size with some error rate and some applicability to the real world. And then a year and a half later or a year later, another generation of that technology comes out that is now bigger and can do more real world work. And so that's the thing that like the thing people kind of get wrong about Moore's law is that it was an observation, not a projection. Moore observed that transistor density was scaling about double every 18 months. And he made note of that, and it was published in a magazine that people took it as Moore's law. And people, because they called it Moore's law, that it was kind of a misinterpretation. It wasn't a law, it was Moore's observation. And so that's where the quantum folks, I think, get ahead of themselves. They say, we're going to scale exponentially here without having a demonstrated cycle of we have scaled exponentially for 2 years, 3 years, or something like that. So that's the evidence that I'm looking for. And again, I'm actively looking for that evidence because I know that I'm biased towards skeptical, and I want to break that bias as early as possible so that we don't end up in a bad situation. But so far, there is no evidence of that. There's not been, and we've seen, you've probably seen it in the quantum papers that you've kind of just seen the headlines for even. What we don't see is, we built this technology, and then we built that same technology bigger with more real world functions the next year or 2 years later. Instead, what we see is this new technology, and then that new technology, and then the third new technology, and then the fourth new technology. They keep doing new things because they haven't found a technology that scales. And that's part of what drives my skepticism, is that we're not scaling the transistor. We're not scaling the optical qubit or the superconducting qubit. We're throwing things at the wall, trying to get something to scale.
Let me take a moment to talk to you about Ellipsis Labs, a team I've known for a while building some of the most interesting products in the space. The Ellipsis team is one of the few that I can consistently point to and say, these guys really know what they're doing. They're backed by Paradigm, Electric Capital, and Hahn Ventures. The founders, Eugene and Jerry, have experience at Citadel, Jane Street, and the Solana Core team. Since launching their order book DEX, Phoenix, they've done over $80 billion in trading volume by making on-chain order books competitive with centralized exchanges. They are also the team behind Gavel and SolFi. I would consider them the foremost experts in crypto market microstructure. The best part is Ellipsis is hiring for New York-based engineers. Work with a small, focused team who are results-driven, collaborative, and use a modern stack. If you're an engineer who wants to work on infrastructure that's already proving itself in the market, go to ellipsislabs.xyz. Okay, now back to the show.
Scott Aronson is somebody who I'm citing him again. He has his blog and he's more on the skeptical side, at least historically, but maybe recently, given the hype, he's made some, more kind of, I don't know, audacious claims. But let's say that I don't want to read research like you read research. I have different passions. But at the same time, I don't want to just throw stuff into ChatGPT and get it to like slop stuff back to me. Like, are there any resources that you think are good, but also to the extent it can sort of gets away from the bag bias? And I'm not necessarily accusing everybody of the bag bias, but like it does seem most of the strong claims come from people who have some like especially the quantum labs and stuff, right? Like obviously they're raising a ton of money, right? Like, so are there any good resources for somebody like me who wants to understand this or at least keep abreast, but I also don't want to read like the 40-page research papers that you're reading?
Yeah, I think both the chain code research paper and the publication that came out after the Presidio Quantum Summit that they did have been pretty measured, and they fall more into that unlikely in the next decade, but we'll keep an eye on it camp, which I think that's, like I said, that's the best I can say with like very high confidence. My logical faculties say that makes sense. That very unlikely, I would say almost zero likelihood, but the claim, that's fine. Either one of those are kind of reasonable things to think in the next decade. We're going to keep an eye on it. So I would say look at those two resources first. And then other resources. The other thing to keep an eye on is just to watch out for people who say the sky is falling. And maybe I'm particularly attuned to that because as someone who was a kind of old school libertarian gold bug for years, like the libertarian gold bugs have been saying that hyperinflation is around the corner since before I was born, since 1970, right? Hyperinflation is around the corner. And those kind of claims just tend to be wrong. I think Scott Adams of Dilbert fame has actually talked about this quite a bit, where most of the time humanity says the sky is falling, and it turns out that it's just an engineering thing that we will solve when the time comes. And we've seen that with Y2K, and we've seen that with a whole bunch of things in human history where the sky isn't actually falling. And we are actually, as a species, pretty good at solving things in a timely manner. But all the people saying the sky is falling is actually not helping. And so the other way to just look is say, who is doing like the methodical, careful research towards quantum resistance, and what are they doing? What are their actions? So I think that's consistent with what I've said about reading the quantum papers. Like, what's the real world saying? And so what's happening in the real world is that people like the Blockstream research team and Hunter Beast and others are doing this methodical process where we're figuring out, can we improve the post-quantum crypto? How do we get that into Bitcoin? How do we make the crypto systems that we need to use work in a post-quantum world? And they're not like slow playing it. They're just doing it in a very circumspect and steady way, where it's kind of almost when it's ready, we're working on it. We know it's there. We don't want to be caught off guard, but we're also not panicked and rushing toward it. And I think I really listened to that signal of, yes, this is a potential thing. And like I said, because a classical break could also happen. Like, we shouldn't sit on our laurels and be like, oh, Bitcoin's good forever. Like, we see some Bitcoiners say that, right? Bitcoin's 1,000-year money. It's good forever. It's perfect. Yeah. Don't change it. And like, we don't want to be that. And so you can look at the people that are kind of between these two places. Oh my God, the sky is falling in 5 years and never change Bitcoin. It's the perfect money. And in between there is this whole group of people that are methodically doing research and getting ready for whatever is next, whether it's a classical break or a quantum break, or just better crypto that would make Bitcoin a better system. We came out with the Schnorr signature algorithm instead of ECDSA in Taproot. That was the result of some of this methodical step-by-step research that's been happening in the background. So really look for that middle signal to stay grounded.
Okay, let's put right after you said the sky is not falling, I'm going to ask you to put your conspiratorial hat on for a second. Given the gravity of quantum computing, or even that may be disputed, but given the alleged gravity of like maybe having a true quantum computer, it's quite likely that nation states and the richest, most powerful people in the world want one of these and are quite likely working on them or staying abreast of what is going on. What is, I'm not asking you to assign like an actual probability here, but what is the probability that the NSA, China, Russia, or even some behemoth company, public or in stealth, has something? And a follow-up, which is, I suppose, the real question, would we know, right, about that? Because that's one thing I see come up a lot. Like, you wouldn't even know if they had it. It's like, well, I mean, I wouldn't know anything regardless. So you're not, like, you're talking to the wrong person. But like, that's something I see come up a lot, which is, you would have no idea that there's probably likely a stable quantum computer out there in prod right now. I'm like, okay, maybe, I don't know. But like, what do you think of this idea that this is such a, massive, important technology for mankind that like research and resources could be thrown at it from places we may have no idea about?
I think the biggest thing there is something like this would be a big project, like Manhattan Project size. And while we from the outside wouldn't necessarily know where the NSA or North Korea or whoever might have gotten to on this research, from the outside, we would still see the trickle downs, the underlying science would still be coming out there. And so I talked with a friend about this yesterday, I think. And so either this is the best hidden massive research project in the history of mankind, or it's not happening. And if it's the best hidden large research project in the history of mankind, they're probably not doing that to break Ethereum or Bitcoin or any of the cryptocurrencies networks. Right? Yeah. They're probably doing it because they want to decrypt communications between their enemies. And the idea that they would blow their load attacking crypto when they have the equivalent of the Enigma decryption, like they went to such lengths to hide their ability to decrypt things with Enigma. They literally let American soldiers die by not using their intel to its full capacity, because that saved so many more Americans and others down the road by keeping the Enigma secret, the Enigma break secret. And so what I can tell you for sure is that if they have it, they're not coming after us in cryptocurrency. They're using it on the geopolitical stage. And based on the evidence of I kind of go back to, have we seen practical, even little bits of scaling starting to happen in the civilian world to show that, yes, this technology has the ability to scale to the point where it could do that? Like, I would totally buy that the NSA is 3 generations ahead. And so if we saw, let's say, the scaling from 2 to 4 to 8 logical qubits in the civilian world, they might have 500 qubits in the NSA. And that would be like a huge difference. But since we don't even see those 2 to 5 to 8 logical qubits in the civilian world, I think it's probably not happening. So you said assign a probability. I would say there's a well, you don't have 1% chance they have something like that.
Yeah.
It's just very, very low, because we don't even see that little trickle down of, we figured out like the very basics to make this start happening. We haven't.
Without asking, not asking you to throw anybody under the bus here, but especially like quite literally in the past 2 weeks, this is like blowing up our timelines, right? Maybe we've just like moved on from, on the Bitcoin side, we moved on from filtering spam and stuff now, right? But it's really come about in the past couple weeks. And like I said, I'm not asking you to throw anybody on the bus, but can you sort of speculate as to why this has just now come to, I mean, you said you've been following this for about a year, like which I have seen stuff also for a while, but so you started digging into a year ago, but I mean, like in the past month or so, it's like everywhere. And like, what is causing this? It just from your perspective, like where's this all coming from?
Crab market. Look, Bitcoin makes an all-time high in gold, and people are fucking grumpy about it. And when you get grumpy, you look for reasons to be grumpy. Seriously, the FUD dice get rolled whenever there's a down market or a crab market, and so someone rolled the FUD dice. We got quantum this time.
Yeah, and also the thing with, like, as you know, probably as well as anybody, but with a lot of the FUD, I mean, I'm even reluctant to call it FUD, because I think that makes it sound like I'm, pushing it away as invalid or something. Like, this stuff is all in some form or another valid. It's just like, from my perspective, okay, so you work on Bitcoin and I don't. And a lot of times I just take the stance like, okay, I'm very invested in this. And what's the worst thing that happens? Well, like, it goes to zero and I die. And it's like, okay, well, that's not that bad. And so then it's like, after that, it's hard for me now to really be fazed by any of this, but I do see other people getting really phased. But it is interesting how this stuff like crops up. And again, it's not rooted in complete conjecture, right? But it really does seem to like captivate people. On that note, I just thought of something. There's been some, people saying that TradFi and the big holders now are getting concerned about quantum. What do you think of this? Just first off,
I don't think about it a ton. I think Mandrick posted something along the lines of, if they are okay, they're selling some Bitcoin. That's okay. People sell Bitcoin all the time. That's how it goes. That's just, capital redistributes in various ways. From the doubters to the confident. It's why Warren Buffett was retired so wealthy, and why I won't, because I'm not as smart as him at making investment decisions for the long term. And that's one of the things that he did so well, is holding through the ups and downs. When you'd see the value in a company and hold it forever. And so, people getting spooked. Okay. I mean, that doesn't give me any information. That's just some people are easily spooked. Some people aren't.
I guess the argument, whether or not you think this is valid, is okay, it doesn't really matter if it's real, it's the perception. But I'm a little bit on your side, which is like, well, I think you guys are making the perception, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're the ones creating this, but it's a reasonable claim, which is like, look, they don't understand this stuff. So something comes along like this and it creates a lot of momentum. Maybe they do start selling. With that said, there was a lot of people, in the past year that have been saying that because so much Bitcoin is going to ETFs, because so much Bitcoin is going to MicroStrategy, that old whales think it's lost its cypherpunkness. And I'm like, people sell for all sorts of reasons, right? Like, they probably are just they probably just want a condo in Monaco. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're overthinking it, right? People, like you said, capital is redistributed. But maybe if there's anything with regards to like, can we at least have some idea of a plan or something along those lines, so that we can go to TradFi who have no idea what's going on and sort of say like, this is the plan, I guess.
Yeah, so you mentioned kind of two very different perspectives there, because there, on the one hand, we have the NGU at all costs mindset, which is, this is bad that quantum is scaring these people off because I want my bags to pump. And like, look, I live in that space as the Bitcoin world who listens to me at least knows I'm learning to fly airplanes. I want to own an airplane, and I have some Bitcoin bags, and they're not going to buy me an airplane if TradFi is not buying, right? So I want those bags pumped as much as anybody. So that's the one mindset, is, NGU at all costs. And there's obviously the exact opposite mindset of Bitcoin's already NGU too much. We've got too much TradFi. And so the old whales are selling because it's not cypherpunk enough anymore. And like, I don't care. Right.
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
Well, also one thing that this is just a bit of a personal, point of contention here, and you're a developer, so I think you understand this even better than I do. But a lot of times the people who say this, I'm like, have you ever spun up a Bitcoin node? Like, have you ever taken an old computer and downloaded up to like current block height? And have you ever tried to, broadcast a transaction directly to the mempool, estimate a fee rate? Like, if I can do this, I feel like Bitcoin's still working to me. And like, I don't really care if BlackRock holds a ton. I don't really care if Michael Saylor holds a ton. I may even have reservations about these people holding a ton of it. But it's like, there's a lot of this kind of concern, comes from people who I'm like, all right, like, have you tried to just use it the way that you're like, alleging that has been totally broken? Because it still works. If I can do it, like somebody who barely knows how to work a computer, like I think a lot of people could figure this out. And like that to me is Bitcoin still working. But of course, people have different opinions of what Bitcoin's working. But yeah, that's usually my like main, is like pushback. Is like, dude, have you like you probably hold it in an ETF yourself, right? Like, so like is a bizarre kind of point of contention, I find.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's the key thing. And many people have made similar points that, look, Bitcoin is not perfect, and there are problems with the way it could be potentially influenced by the big holders and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I run a Bitcoin node. My transactions go through my node. I can use it on chain. And there's even improvements happening in that realm. Like we look at things that are happening at Cake Wallet and at Block and Anchor Watch. Like there's so many companies out there that are making products for using Bitcoin kind of the real way, using real Bitcoin, and it gets better every year, and it gets more usable, and people don't even kind of think about, even the Block Square launch recently, people don't really realize what a change that is in the world of using real Bitcoin. And is it like super cypherpunk? Is it the magically perfect thing that some people kind of wanted it to be? No, but it is real people using real money for the first time since 1850 or something. Like people, maybe 1900, like people stopped using real money and lost track of what that meant. And now we're in a world where real money is a thing for many people if they want it. That's huge. And we're still there, regardless of what's happening with the ETFs and Sailor and it's not cypherpunk enough anymore and all this stuff. But the reality, if you look again, I really live in this real world thing where in the real world, I see better and better and better access to real money for people.
Well, and fees are so cheap on the base layer that, like, I'm sorry, but even if you are in a third world country and you make $20 a day, if you want, you can still self-custody UTXO. Like, Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Like, maybe in the future, and I agree, like, there are scaling solutions that hopefully will come along, but like for the time being, there's zero excuse. Like, I'm sorry, but like, go look, it's less than one sap per VByte, right? Like, you can do this if you want. So, but on that note, there's been a lot of kind of, this transcends just the quantum topic. There's been a lot of discussion about Core and whether or not they do anything or even aware of this stuff. What do you think about the, pushback on Core? Are they doing enough? Does it matter if they do anything? Like, what, just like, give me, there's this always, it seems like all different types of FUD also bring up, like, let's screech at Core, which sometimes is fine, but like, it's interesting. So I'm curious to hear what you think about, this aspect, like the real developers.
I have a great respect for the core maintainer team and the core developers, outside of the maintainers as well. I don't think they're perfect. And I think that's the key thing, which I find so funny. Before the filter FUD, essentially, if you will, I was a pretty loud skeptic of core. Yeah. Because I think that they do a lot of really good work as a group. However, I think they don't really acknowledge the importance of continuing to develop Bitcoin's consensus rules to improve over time, whether that's for better crypto systems or for things that I really like, the covenants, whatnot. So I was a loud skeptic of Core. And then the filter folks come out and they're like screeching about Core being captured and Blockstream and chain code or whatever are running Core. And you're like, well, no, that's not it. I mean, they're imperfect, but they're not captured. They're not bad actors. They're just a group of people that are trying to build an incredibly challenging piece of software for a very adversarial environment, and they're making the best decisions that they each can every day to make Bitcoin better. And so I have actually great confidence on both the filter topic and the quantum topic that Core actually is quite capable of making good decisions for Bitcoin that will protect it in the long run. And that's going to include rejecting quantum cryptography that's going to be, a downside to Bitcoin, whether it's because it's insecure or because it's simply too large and it breaks the throughput, or we can't use it in signature aggregation, or whatever the reasons might be. I'm extremely confident in their ability to make those decisions in the places where it matters most around, again, whether quantum or filters or whatever.
Do you feel that Core is too gatekept? And because this is a frequent, aspersion launched their way. But one thing that I have sort of found now, like having talked to people who worked on Bitcoin Core, who formerly worked on Bitcoin Core, is like a lot of these people, they're doing stuff that maybe 0.1% of people who hold Bitcoin even know exists. Like, they're working on package relay, or like the most sort of random little niche parts of keeping a distributed network alive. And all of this like contention, they really have very little, like some of them don't even know what's going on. They're working on their little niche, and they're maybe funded by Chaincode, they may be funded by Blockstream, right? But like I just, it's funny that there's this disconnect, because this has been there was a similar argument against, Ethereum developers, that they're like very detached and they're in this kind of like castle and they have no idea what the plebs are up to. But the other side of this is now having spoken to a lot of people who worked on core. Like I remember talking to Carl Dong, who built Obscura, and like when he was telling me he was doing when he was, contributing to core there for a bit, I was like, oh, like interesting. I didn't even know that was a thing. You know what I mean? Like, so it's really fascinating how people project like what core wants and like the ideals that they set out. And like, this is the version of Bitcoin they want. And I'm like, guys, these people are just like coding all day. They have no idea what you're talking about. Right. So I'm kind of curious, but like, do you feel at all that it's gatekept in any capacity, or is it, too closed off from the populace, if you will?
Yeah, I do think it's a little bit gatekept, and I want to make sure that I'm very clear. I have huge respect for the work that the core maintainers and team do, and I think that for quite a few reasons, some really good reasons, and some maybe complex social reasons, it's a little bit too cliquey. And there's kind of a culture around the Bitcoin core project that is hard for people to break into. I've certainly seen other open source projects that are more, that make it more tractable for outsiders to make big contributions than the Bitcoin core project. And here's like a kind of minor example of that would be the situation with CTV.
Yeah.
Which obviously I'm a big supporter of CTV. I think probably everyone on the internet who knows me knows that by now. And so CTV is good. It was the best option for Bitcoin moving forward for years. And then in the last year, some people that are closer to the Bitcoin core project made an alternative to CTV called template hash, which is basically the same features with two, let's say, material differences. And now that has more attention from the Bitcoin core team, partially, I think, because of who, as opposed to because of what. So yes, there is some of that. Now, you said something specific, which is too detached from the plebs or kind of what the community wants. And I would say, no, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
because we have to... Bitcoin can only survive and thrive if it is resilient to all forms of Sybil attack, social attack, etc. And so the fact that the Bitcoin core team is developing the best software based on the best engineering principles, regardless of what the plebs or Sailor or Fink or Besant or anybody say, that's a feature, not a bug. They have to be detached from all of that. They need to be doing the best engineering for Bitcoin, which has absolutely nothing to do with what anybody who uses Bitcoin is demanding. This is not a user demand driven system. This is a cryptographic principle. This is an engineering principle. This is a distributed systems principle driven system. We do not, as a developer community, serve the people what the people want. If we did, Bitcoin would just die, because serving the people would be the exact attack vector that a malicious attacker or destroyer of Bitcoin would use. They would create a bot army, maybe even a real person army, to create a lot of noise that creates community consensus for a change that destroys Bitcoin. Like, obviously, Bitcoin Core cannot and will not be responsive to the users. That's not how it works.
That's something that is kind of jarring for people who aren't accustomed to open source projects or like how these things work. It doesn't really resonate with their worldview. And again, I take the stance like these people probably will figure it out, and if they don't, well, like, we tried. It's like much easier for me to be like, yeah, these guys are obviously smarter than me when it comes to this stuff. Like, I'm going to defer to them, and hopefully they make the right decisions. Okay, let's finish up with some of the. Well, now we kind of derail, but like, let's go back to the quantum thing for 1 second. What are some of the proposed solutions? So we have this guy Hunter Beast, who is one of our internet friends, and he has this thing called BIP360, which is a Bitcoin improvement proposal to do something that will create quantum resistance. What are the other, like? So talk to me about that, and then also what are the other proposals, or maybe you don't think much needs to be done, which is fine. But yeah, give me an overview there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think much needs to be done, but I support BIP360, Hunter's proposal. This is actually the great thing about Bitcoin and about the Bitcoin technical community. Hunter Beast and I could almost not possibly be further apart on the quantum risk, and yet we both support BIP360. because through the process of technical improvement discussions, BIP360 was made into something that is a general improvement for Bitcoin that also takes one significant step towards quantum resistance for the future of Bitcoin. And it's amazing, right? So I don't care about quantum. Maybe he doesn't care about the other benefits of BIP360, but we both support BIP360 because it's a step towards things we both want for Bitcoin in terms of the types of wallets and tools and privacy and everything that we want. BIP360 is great. So that's
what is it?
So BIP360 just creates a new address type. So right now we have taproot addresses, which are BC1
Yeah.
P?
Yeah, BC.
No, Q. Anyway, BC1Q is taproot, I believe. And BC1P was native SegWit. Anyway, so BIP360 creates a new address type for Bitcoin, which is BC1Z. And that new address type has it doesn't have any plain key material in the address itself, whereas taproot addresses have plain key material, public key material in the address. So a quantum computer can see a taproot address, and if it had the ability to reverse public keys to private keys, it can go straight from the address to a private key and then spend that Bitcoin.
Got it.
And BIP360 does not have that specific aspect. It's a hash, which quantum computers are a little bit helpful for breaking hashes if they ever get there, but they don't fundamentally break hashes the way they could fundamentally break elliptic curve keys. So BIP360 puts a hash instead of a key into the address, but is otherwise similar to Taproot, where you can have a variety of different scripts underneath that hash. So that's all BIP360 is. New address type that's hashes only, no key in the address itself.
Are there other proposals? Oh, also, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the current, assuming this is just for listeners' sake and, maybe some reassurance, current Bitcoin addresses are typically quantum safe. Is that correct? If you're self-custodying in some capacity, assuming your keys are not from 2009, correct me if whatever I'm saying is incorrect, but they are more either quantum safe or more quantum safe than Satoshi's keys.
Yeah. So this is a bit of a contentious topic as well, because everything is contentious here.
Yeah.
So pay to script hash, pay to witness script hash, pay to witness pub key hash. These are kind of the legacy 3 addresses, 1 addresses, and BC1 P addresses. These are all hashed address types. Pay to witness script hash, pay to WSH. If they have the H in them, they're hashed address
You're good.
types.
Okay.
And those are resistant to if you've never reused an address and if your descriptor or your XPub are secret. Those are important qualifiers. Then those address types are resistant to long-range quantum attacks, meaning that if there was a quantum computer that can reverse a public key to a private key in 5 days or a week or a year, those address types are safe from that, because when you go to spend from it, your transaction is confirmed and buried under proof of work before the quantum computer could break your key.
Okay, good news.
But if there's a quantum computer that can reverse a key in 10 minutes, those are not safe.
So in the period where you've broadcast a transaction, but it has not yet been confirmed, it could be decrypted.
Yeah. So that's the key thing, is those hash addresses, they're safer if you've never used an address and if your public keys are secret. You've never given your XPub to a public website.
Yeah, so the XPub is the important thing, right? That's the most, okay.
Right, so if you've leaked your XPub, then those address types are also not safe.
And you also shouldn't leak your XPub to begin with.
Don't leak it.
Yeah. I did.
And so one of the things that's really important here is most exchange balances, or most exchanges reuse addresses. And so all the exchange balances are quantum vulnerable, even though they use hashed address types, because they mostly reuse addresses.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So anyway, so I think that's somewhat of a false god to say that those addresses are more quantum resistant, because if quantum breaks the Bitcoin secret key or public key to secret key process, so much Bitcoin is vulnerable between Satoshis and the exchange balances and all the other coins that have on reused addresses. I don't think the hashed addresses really make a huge difference.
Interesting. Okay.
Now that said, I've recently been doing a bunch of quantum research, as you know, and one of the things that I realized that I had not, even though I've built Taproot wallets, which is kind of sad, I had not realized that there already is a recommendation in the Taproot BIPs to make there be a quantum resistant feature of the taproot addresses. And so what this actually means is that all modern address types, since P2PK, since those 2009 addresses, all modern address types have sufficient quantum resistance hidden in them that if there were to be, let's say tomorrow, we found out that the NSA actually has a quantum computer and we immediately need to fix Bitcoin. There's actually a path where we fix Bitcoin and almost everybody who has not reused addresses or published their XPub can still recover their coins. Because all it takes for people to be able to recover their coins is that there's something secret that they can use to prove that they are the correct holder of those coins. Even if the public key gets reversed to the secret key, if they have some other secret that no one else knows, they can still recover their coins.
Okay.
I have to do a little more research here still. This is kind of stuff that I just started learning about, but a couple of proposals were written on the Bitcoin development mailing list this year to enable people to make a commitment to the transaction they're going to make before they reveal which coins are theirs, and then move the coins after the commitment is buried. And that's why you just need some secret information you can commit to, and then reveal it to spend the coins. So the long and short here is that sincerely, for everyone listening, the sky is not falling. Most people would probably be able to recover most or all of their coins, even if tomorrow a quantum computer were revealed. Bitcoin would immediately soft fork to disable elliptic curve spends, and then would go on to enable one of these recovery techniques to let people recover their coins.
Got it.
So like the sky just is not falling.
Let me, I said that was going to be the last point, but actually I can't believe I haven't asked this yet. Satoshi's assuming a quantum, I'll qualify this, assuming a quantum computer is a real thing and it is created at some point, Satoshi's coins are vulnerable, right? And so that's what, like over 1 million, or right around 1 million coins. What do you think happens?
So it really depends on what the process is of quantum breaking. So like I said, if it's sudden, like if tomorrow we found out that a quantum computer broke Bitcoin's cryptography, so we don't already have a deployed quantum resistant method, then I think all elliptic curve signature operations would probably be disabled, because that's the only way to preserve any semblance of fair ownership of Bitcoin, is we just disable that, and then we create some recovery method for those who have secure coins to recover them. So that's I think the one scenario is a sudden break where we haven't done enough preparation and it breaks suddenly. There's a decent path there. And then there's the gradual progress where, let's say in 10 years, kind of the narrowest inside of my kind of tiny itty bitty maybe chance quantum could break Bitcoin would be the very soonest, maybe if something magic happens tomorrow in 10 years. So in 10 years, the first quantum computer that can break a public key over a 2-year processing time is created. Someone uses that to reverse Satoshi's keys, and we see Satoshi coins start to move. In that case, I would speculate that, I don't know for sure, it's just a speculation, that because of the gradual process, most Bitcoiners say it's better not to confiscate coins than to protect that supply of Satoshi's coins. It's better to let the quantum adversary get them gradually, rather than disrupting the system by turning off elliptic curves or whatever, because it's gradual. So instead, what we do in that case is we would, let's say in 10 years, we see that very first thing happen. It's a gradual process. We would make sure that there are quantum hard addresses available, and people would migrate their own coins to those addresses over the next couple of years. Meanwhile, over the next couple of years, Satoshi's coins are being stolen by the quantum adversary, and that's fine. Like that's I think a very reasonable place as well.
Okay, so like, because this has long been proposed as somewhat of a bounty, right? Like, for the creation or existence of a quantum computer. I think that I lean on that side of let them be taken, but I don't know what the community thinks. So you're saying that if it is gradual, you're inclined to think that people would say, okay, like we know what's happening. I mean, that'd be a lot of supply in the market. I'm sure it would be if it was, or maybe not.
Well, but because Satoshi's keys, it's not like all the coins are on one public key.
Right. It's not like a ton of different addresses, right?
I think I can't remember. I have to go back and look at like the distribution. But one of the reasons we don't know exactly how many coins Satoshi has is that he used rotating keys. And so the way we know best which coins went to Satoshi is based on the pattern of the hashes in the blocks that he mined.
Like the Satoshi thing, right?
Yeah. So as far as I know, it's a lot of different keys, and so it's not like the first quantum computer that breaks the first public key that takes. Let's say it takes
$2
years to break it.
1 million Bitcoin market order.
Right? No, they get 200 Bitcoin, that first one, and then gradually, as quantum computers improve, they're able to capture more and more by breaking more of his keys.
One thing that would be hilarious is if we confiscated and it was actually him.
That'd be fucked up. That'd be really fucked up.
So, but like I am really fascinated with this conversation. Where do you think, like, so I lean on that side, like it is a bounty for quantum computing. What do you think the community is in agreement there, or do you think, because so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Peter Willey was on the side of we should in some form or another confiscate them, but I could be wrong. What do you think?
I don't remember Peter's. I know Jameson Lopp is certainly on the confiscate side. So there's definitely different opinions.
So why do you think he says that? Like where is the other side?
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable look at kind of fairness of saying, rather than letting the attacker get those coins, we should give everyone who's active in Bitcoin still an opportunity to migrate their coins first. And then we should disable the rest of the coins rather than giving them to an attacker. So I think that's a reasonable take as well. It's not my personal take. I think the redistribution of those coins has no bad aspect for the network. It essentially rewards another kind of innovation, and that's okay. Even though, if they're an attacker, is it theft? I don't really know, how to describe it. It's kind of weird. Cryptographic possession is such a major part of Bitcoin. And one reason I'm comfortable with that is that I've publicly said I would bet against quantum breaking Bitcoin in the next 10 years. I tried to get Nick Carter to take me up on that bet, for that matter. And so I would say, if I make the wrong bet and I don't move my coins to a quantum resistant address, it's okay if my coins get stolen. I am very comfortable making that bet and even losing that bet.
Yeah. I think also, though, if you were to if we did what I'm assuming Jameson's talking about, that would reduce the supply. It would no longer be 21 million, right?
Right.
It's quite a
weird...
weird...
I prefer it that we reliven those coins. So let's imagine again, there's a slow break of quantum and we see the evidence mounting. We get a quantum resistant signature algorithm deployed to Bitcoin. We give everyone the chance to migrate. Let's say they have 2 or 3 years to migrate to quantum resistant, and then the coins start moving. I'm kind of okay with the people who didn't migrate in 3 years losing their coins. Again, I might be one of those people, and I'm still okay with it because I think I'm such a skeptic of quantum. The market rewarding people for making correct decisions is what the market does. And so if you make the wrong decision about migrating to quantum, you lose your coins.
Yeah, it's interesting. That aspect of it is a little bit harder to square. So like the way I look at it a little bit is, how one trope that a lot of the Bitcoin maxis, maybe, not necessarily developers or anything, but they talk about this idea like digital scarcity can only be created once. And in some ways it's like technically and like objectively untrue. Like there's a lot of cryptos that are more scarce and have less of a supply than Bitcoin. But on the other hand, it's like directionally correct. And the reason they talk about this usually is like if Ethereum flipped Bitcoin, it would completely destroy the notion that there's such thing as a store of value, because then a digital store of value, because then something will come along and flip Ethereum, right? And what we're saying is that it's not in fact a store of value. It is in fact purely a technological innovation. So like that, what my point is saying that the people who say this, I'm usually like, yeah, just like you probably don't know what you're talking about, but it's like it is actually maybe directionally correct. I sort of apply the same broad rationale to this idea of like the confiscation of coins or whatever, because it's kind of like, on one hand, yes, like, you have 2 or 3 years to migrate, and that's, maybe you deserve to lose your coins at that juncture, right? But at the same time, if we were to think of like a bearer asset like gold, right, where ideally, you assuming it's in your possession and you have this security to, hold it, it is yours in perpetuity, and you can take it anywhere and you can have that value, right?
The inability to destroy gold is a value of gold.
Exactly. And so there is some like it could definitely, I could definitely see this, assuming any of this is viable, I could see this really spooking the market in the sense that if a quantum computer is able to, take your coins, it may concern people that the next version of a quantum computer can break the quantum resistant stuff. You know what I mean? Like those shelling points can be very real. From at least from like a sociological perspective.
Well, yeah, and I think the problem is that those problems exist on both sides of this.
Right.
If the developers can disable your signature algorithm because they think there's a new threat, then your ownership is pretty suspect.
Right, exactly.
Or if that new threat can take your coins, your ownership is suspect. And at least for me, I am much more comfortable with, if I don't choose to move to new cryptography and my coins get stolen, that's an error on my part. I'm much more comfortable with that than with the developers being able to turn off my signature algorithm when they decide there's a threat.
It's kind of like you left your gold outside. You left it on the park bench, and
that's
on
me.
Yeah.
And that's why only if there's a sudden break would I support turning off the elliptic curve, because the sudden break is something that, let's say, no one really predicted, and then the only rational course is that to preserve some sense of ownership, we just disable all of that. But if it's a gradual break, it's like people had a chance to fix their shit.
Yeah,
their coins are gone.
Yeah. Okay. One final question. I promised the last one. Do you think we get any? Since I have you, do you think we get any upgrades to Bitcoin in the next 2 years? I'm throwing out an arbitrary timeline. 2 years, and if so, what are they, or is it?
I would say I'm optimistic. Let's say I'll give it a 75% chance in the next 2 years.
Okay.
We at least see kind of activation. We at least see an activation client that is widely supported and is kind of in the activation process in the next couple of years would be 75%. And if I had to really guess at what it might be, I would not be surprised if it ended up being BIP360 plus the Taproot native rebindable signature soft fork, which is template hash, internal key, and checksig from stack. Or it could be consensus cleanup, although I think there's a little bit more controversy around that. I think I've been surprised and happy, frankly. I think BIP360 has seen a lot of support. And then the Taproot native rebindable construct is basically the modern successor to both CTV/L-enhance, kind of my stuff, and the logical successor to any prev out. And both of those had a lot of support in the past. That proposal is getting close to kind of refined and ready. There's support around it. And that those things together make a really good, compelling upgrade for Bitcoin. And it comes from the right region of France to be supported and all this stuff. So yeah, if I had to guess what it would be those. One little side note there, I did not fully answer one of your questions, which was what else is out there for kind of current proposals to improve quantum resistance. And one of the great things about the situation is that there's a lot of ways we can get some level of quantum resistance. So BIP360 is a stepping stone. If we were to add OpCat to Bitcoin, with OpCat, you can build quantum resistant signatures on chain in scripts, essentially. And so the other thing I wouldn't be surprised to see would be to also include OpCat in that opcode package I was just mentioning. So BIP360 plus the Taproot native rebindable plus OpCat, because then we have a genuine story that says we've got quantum resistance. We also solved for a lot of kind of vaulting and security use cases. We also solved for lightning symmetry. We solved a bunch of different people's problems with something that is not a ton of code. It's something that is very tractable to activate. It's a safe, reasonable upgrade that matches the kind of core gradual process and really solves a lot of desires for the future of Bitcoin at all levels, right? That the pure technical stuff that I said core focuses on, this solves problems they have, and also the kind of the user side that I said we should ignore as much as possible, but we also don't totally ignore that it also solves problems for them. So the fact that we get both of those together with that opcode package would be pretty cool. Okay,
well, I'm hopeful as well. You're on Twitter. Is it at ReardenCode?
Yep.
At ReardenCode. Okay. You're currently independent, right? Like do you work for anybody right now? I work for
some grants, and I kind of do my own writing and publishing and stuff, just my own thing for now.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, follow Brandon at ReardenCode on Twitter, and you can stay apprised of all of the skepticism around quantum. So thank you so much for coming on. This was fantastic and very timely. So I appreciate it.
Thanks much, Court.